Good morning, everybody, and welcome to part 2 of CommsCamp. So today, what we're going to be talking about is strategy, and I'm really excited that later on we've got Fiona Milliken joining us, who's the General Manager of 11 in Sydney. And we'll be sharing more of what she says, but one of the big things that she talks about is that strategy is about thinking in years, not days and weeks. And I think that's a really good starting point for this session, just to try and get your head into the right space of, really understanding what we mean by strategy. If you can think about strategy as being a long-term thing and thinking in years rather than days, that's really going to help elevate your thinking up to the next level. So just going back to our capability review, as everyone should be aware, we have the survey on our website, which we've shared a link to. And if you wanted to fill that form in and tick the buttons in the right places, if you drop your email address in, we'll be able to kind of put your strategy into a document for you. Sorry, put your scores into a document and map you on a spider graph and send that back to you. Or also within our worksheets, we've provided a version of this that you can write on yourself. So you might just want to score it yourself. You could share it with your teams as well. So there's sort of 5 key areas that we are covering in the strategy section, which I'll be talking about today. The first part is about having smart communications objectives and aligning these against the business objectives. So clearly business objectives are a really good starting point, and that's ultimately what we're all here to do. Whether it's a business, whether it's a public sector organisation, a charity, or something else entirely, I think, all of us are here to communicate with purpose in order to deliver something. And that's going to come back to what is the organisation here for, what are we trying to achieve, and what's the big picture. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And that will lead into developing a strategy. And we've got various tools that we're going to use today to try and help you with the strategy. But this is just a starting point. So I would say keep thinking and keep developing it from the discussions today. Use today as a starting point though. And what we'll be doing today, a bit differently to last week, is kind of focusing in on the worksheets that we've provided and giving some sort of discussion around the different pages in the worksheet. Then we'll talk about your value proposition and really identifying what your differentiators are. And then I think something for everyone to take away and think about when we move into planning and content and channels is thinking about how the strategy can be consistently executed. And then finally, having that creative platform that will support the strategy. And that would also come a bit later on. So first of all, what is a strategy? And I think strategy is a difficult thing to get your head around, and it's definitely something that we come across often is people maybe just not quite understanding what strategy is. And certainly within a business and maybe outside the comms team, we see the word strategy really being overused and misapplied. So people will talk about having a social media strategy, a Facebook strategy, an Instagram strategy, a content strategy. You can apply strategy to lots of different things, and yes, that's important, but actually when you sort of test what you're coming up with and what people mean when they ask for a strategy, quite often it's not a strategy that they're looking for. It's more of a tactical plan or an idea of how maybe we're going to use a specific channel. So tactics are important, and we're always going to use tactics, and tactics are ultimately how you achieve the strategy. But what we need to do up front is elevate our thinking a bit. And going back to Fiona's quote, we need to think in years, not in days or weeks. And we need to really try and identify how can communications take what we are looking to achieve and package it up. And what is the strategy going to be to give us this real long-term view of where we're trying to get to? So in many ways, the detail doesn't really fit in here. It's not about having a step-by-step plan. The strategy bit is some big thinking, and it's really just trying to think, what are the core sort of pillars of how we're going to achieve what we're working towards. So this first part here is all about strategy, and then the second section is about tactics. So for tactics, quite often they talk about this in a football analogy. So the strategy is the big picture. How are we going to beat the other team? And it's maybe analysing how they play and thinking about their weak spots and identifying a bigger idea of how we're going to do that. Then from a tactical point of view, the tactics are the little things that you're going to do, the little steps. And I think that's quite a good way to think about a communication plan as well. So first of all, thinking about the value proposition. And I think this slide is probably skewed slightly towards businesses and commercial operations that maybe sell products or services. But if you're in the third sector, if you're in the public sector, you can also have your own version of a value proposition and really use this model, but maybe apply some of your own words into these sections, so that you can just think about where you fit and how you can work alongside your customer profile. I think a lot of what we talk today in strategy is going to feed backwards into the discussion that we had last week about insights, because if you don't have the insights and you don't understand your customer and your market, but also your position within that market and what that value proposition is, it's going to be really difficult to create the strategy. So I would say before you go into the strategy, it's worth having a really critical look at the insights development that you've done and really thinking, have you cracked the insights yet? And if you haven't, it's actually better to hold off a bit and spend some more time on the insights, because the better your insights are, the clearer your strategy becomes. And actually, talking about the golden egg that we were talking about last week, of this real key insight that's going to be a basis for your entire campaign, if you get the insight right, then the strategy will almost create itself, and it should be right in front of you. And it doesn't need to be overcomplicated. It can be really quite simple. And I think for everything we talk about over this 10-week program, keep things simple, don't overcomplicate. And often the thing that you see that's right in front of you and feels a bit obvious, sometimes that is the right way to go. And you can be creative while keeping it simple, and that's often the best stuff that goes the furthest and has the greatest impact. So always try not to overcomplicate things too much. So thinking about value proposition, on the left hand side here, we are really thinking about your organization and what it does. So it's worth drawing this out on a piece of paper and doing the square with the three lines within it, and thinking on the left hand side, what products and services do we have? What are our product lines? And then are there any variations within that? What do we offer? Like, what is our sales pitch effectively? What is it we're taking out to the market? And then up at the top, think about the gain creators. So this is really the kind of benefits of what you give. So if you make really nice whiskey, the gain is you get to really enjoy the taste and the flavor. You get to maybe you find it relaxing and enjoyable to drink whiskey, obviously. Within reason. We're not encouraging people to drink too much whiskey. So thinking about the gains, and then on the opposite level, thinking about the pain relievers. So what's the issue that you solve? Do you see a lot of it in startups where people will say, I went out to the market and I was trying to find something and it just wasn't there. Now I've created it to fill that space. So you're thinking about that. And what you'll see is that on the other side, where you have your customer profile, these things are all going to match. So think about the customer and think about the pain that they have. What's the challenge that they face? This can also help you to later on start to create some nice campaigns. So to give you an example of this, I remember being in a brainstorm once for a supermarket chain, and as part of the customer profiling exercise, we were talking about all the challenges you have when you go to a supermarket. So we went through the pains exercise and we came up with a whole list of things that we hate about going to the supermarket. And that included the fact that when you push the trolley, it's always got one dodgy wheel, and that you take your 2 children with you and they want everything from the sweets aisle and they're jumping out and running away and you don't know where they are and you're chasing them and then you've left your shopping behind, and kind of talked about all the stresses of going to the supermarket. And as part of that, we profiled, what are actually the challenges that your customers are facing. And then when it came to value proposition, we tried to build a new value proposition for one of the big high street supermarket chains that we were working with. And what we came up with, we didn't ever deliver these, unfortunately, because they would have been really fun campaigns, but we came up with this idea of an amazing supermarket that's, built around fixing the pains that you have. So we wanted to invent a trolley that had wheels that just don't break, so that it always goes in the direction that you point it. And we also came up with an idea of an electric trolley that you don't even need to push, it just follows you around. So watch this space, that might come out one day. And then the other thing we came up with was building a creche into the front of all the supermarkets so that you could bring your children. IKEA do this already quite nicely, but you can take your children, you can pop them into the creche, go away and focus on your shopping and know that they're having a nice time. And that, as those 2 ideas, we think would have been really nice national news stories to take out and create some buzz about the supermarket chain that we worked with. So it's just a bit of an example really there of how you can profile your customer, apply a value proposition to it, and then not only solve a pain or create some value, but also that as you get later into the planning stages and you're looking at the more tactical delivery, obviously the strategy there was make it easy for the shopper, and then the tactics were the trolley that doesn't go in the wrong direction and the creche in the shop. So you can start to actually see how these things all pull together. And I think naturally as communicators, we probably do this a lot of the time without really realizing we're doing it. But when you're creating the strategy, it's really worth writing it all down, and it might just help spring out some new ideas and some new insights as well. So that's a starting point on value proposition. Later on, we're going to talk to Fiona Milliken, who runs one of Sydney's leading PR agencies. And she's going to be talking about purpose-led communications, which is something that she's really passionate about. And I think this is a really interesting point to get across and something to really think about within your organisation. Now, obviously, purpose can't purely come out of the communications function. Purpose needs to sit across an organisation, and that's something that we'll discuss with Fiona later on. But there's various versions of what they call the hedgehog, which is finding a way to identify the purpose. And it's also worth applying this to yourself as well as a communicator and somebody in the team, is thinking about what your purpose is within the organisation, and then thinking about what the organisation's purpose is and how communications can communicate that purpose and use that purpose for good. So there's sort of 4 things to really think about. Up at the top, what do you love? Down to the right-hand side, what does the world need? And the point where they cross over is that thought around a mission. So a lot of businesses do have a mission statement. Sometimes it is, at risk of being something that's put in the drawer and people forget about. So you need to make sure the mission is clear. Then you think about what you can be paid for. So from a commercial perspective, what will people buy and how can that work? and the phrase there is vocation for where that fits across. What are you good at? And then when you merge together what you're good at with what you can be paid for, that's going to get your profession. So here, hopefully a lot of us as communicators, we're good at communication, and we can be paid to do external communication for the brands that we work for. So that's our profession. But if we can then build into that what you love, then that adds in a passion as well. And hopefully we all feel purposeful, and we all feel kind of empowered in our organizations to, it's more than just a job. It's something that excites us every day. And I think that is where this sense of purpose comes in. And that's where all of these things cross over. So it's not in the worksheets, but I think this is a really nice thing to go away and do. And I would definitely think about applying this both to yourself as a person and an individual, and then also applying it to your brand. And you may find a lot of this work has already been done. It depends on the brand you work for and what depth you've gone into on this. But the purpose is a really good starting point. And I think a lot of the time in communications, we are trying to create stories, but actually there's often a great story that's sitting underneath that maybe has not yet been tapped into. So as communicators, if we can try and actually unpick the story that's already there, then that's a really good starting point. And one of my passions is family businesses. And it's really because when you look at the heritage and the history of a family business, it's often got a really good purpose, and it goes all the way back the generations. So if you work for a family business, this is a really nice starting point as well. Next, and again, I feel like this does cross between the insights content that we talked about last week, and then obviously the strategy, and how do we identify how communications can deliver what the organization needs. This shouldn't be new to most people, I wouldn't have thought, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it today. But the idea of a SWOT is, again, a really good place to maybe get some engagement with your colleagues. So if you want to go out to the wider communications team in your organization, if you want to try and engage with sales and marketing, maybe if you want to reach into management or go out to the whole organization, a SWOT can be quite a nice starting point just to get other perspectives and get some insights from other people within your organization into what they see as being strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. A couple of starting points on this, though. I would always see the top two, the strengths and the weaknesses, as being internal things. So generally, you've probably got some control over those strengths and weaknesses, and they're generally relating to your brand, your organization, and the kind of internal picture. And then on the bottom, I would say is generally going to be an external factor. So there are things like a pestle analysis that you can apply to opportunities and threats, which look at political and technological advances, for example. And, being the optimist that I am, I always like to see this a little bit left heavy. So it's important to be realistic. It's important to map out everything that's there. But the majority of threats you can turn into an opportunity. So if something bad is coming down the line, I would always see the opportunity as being, we can pivot and we can find a way around this so that we come out stronger on the other side. So I think it's always good to try and balance this out and to try and counteract any of the threats with opportunities. And if you don't do that, then this can be a miserable exercise, because if you end up right heavy, then your mindset's not in the right place, I don't think. So I would be realistic, but then even if the genuine picture is right heavy, I would think about what steps can I make and what's within my control to try and move things to the left, basically. And then we're going to talk in a moment about SMART objectives, and I love a SMART objective. I think it's really important that an organization or a comms team or ourselves as an agency supporting a brand, really important for us to be able to measure and be specific about what we're trying to achieve. And without a SMART objective, it's difficult to know where you're going. However, there is a restriction around SMART objectives. And in some ways, I feel like making everything completely smart and not thinking at a higher level can sometimes hold you back slightly. Because if you're just being realistic and you're not thinking, you know, how could we shoot for the stars and how can we just do something amazing that's, you know, 10 times, 100 times better than what everybody else is doing, a SMART objective probably isn't going to get you there, because when you start to test the SMART objective against the 5 things that we'll talk about in a moment, you might start to say, actually, this isn't realistic, it's not achievable, and you know, I can't put a time against it because I don't really want to, I don't want to put my job on the line and saying I'm going to achieve this in the next 12 months because it's too big, it's too difficult. So I think it's always worth having a really big organization level goal that might not be achievable, it might not be realistic, but in a dream world, this is where you would go. And by even just thinking about that and visualizing it, you're going to have a much better chance of getting there. And then hopefully the SMART objectives will become incremental gains that will take you maybe not all the way to that big goal. Maybe it is just too difficult and too hard and too far away. But if you set your sights quite high to begin with, then you've got somewhere that you're always aiming for. If your goals and your SMART objectives are too easy, then you're not going to go outside your comfort zone and you're not going to push yourself forwards. So I would say SMART objectives, really important and really good ways to set a plan. But let's try and push ourselves a bit as well through this program, and let's try and have a big organization goal. So as I said, a SMART objective is a really good basis for a communications plan, because it's going to set out on a small level what are some of the objectives that we can tick off over a specific time frame so that we're working towards where we're trying to get to. Now, there's different variations of SMART, so use the one that works best for you. You don't need to use our one. But the 5 that we use are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And each of those parts does play a really important role. So I'm going to give you just a couple of examples that I wrote this morning that would apply to different organizations. So the first one is to increase sales in Europe, Middle East and Africa by 15% year on year in Q2 2021. So that is really specific. If that is your objective and you write it down and you commit to it, then you know you can come back and have a look at that at the end of Q2 2021. You can refer back to Q2 2020 because we're looking here year on year, and you can check, have you delivered that increase? Now, obviously it's a risky communications objective because the chances are you're probably not the only person responsible for that objective being met. But at the kind of latter stages of this program, we're going to talk about measurement. And we're going to have the founder of the Barcelona Principles come and join us and talk to us about those. And they are very much focused on measurable outcomes rather than outputs. So what you'll find along here is, maybe apart from brand awareness, which is probably a kind of grey area of what we're talking about here, I would say the rest of the examples we've given are really focused in on the organization, not on, you know, how much media coverage we've delivered or whether we've had, you know, been on the front page of The Guardian or gotten onto the Good Morning sofa. So it's focused on the organization and it's linked back to a bigger business objective. So the first one, obviously, increasing sales. The second one would be achieving a 20% uplift in breast cancer screenings in Wales in 2020. So there's a common theme here. We're providing a number, a figure, a percentage. I mean, actually, the three I've given here have percentages, but they don't always need to be. You could give a hard number. You'll know what you're trying to measure, and you should know what your organisation is trying to achieve. So I would just stick some measures in here that are really clear, and they are black and white, and then you can go back at the end, and obviously in the middle as well, you need to be checking incrementally as you go along. But you can double check that you're on track to meet these communications objectives. And the great thing about having a long-term strategy like this, and also about the way that things like digital can help these days, is there should be ways that you can really be checking in on these as the time frame goes along. So if you're looking to increase sales in EMEA by 15% year on year, you might want to break that into some smaller incremental measures as well that you could use. If you have maybe a big consumer brand and you have budget for brand awareness surveys, then again, that could be a good measure of the impact of your communications. So you could be looking at, how can we increase our prompted brand awareness over a specific time period? So that's another example. And then at this stage, I think going back to the previous one, keep thinking about how you can use communications to achieve the SMART objectives. And this is really just a bit of a box just to dump some thinking at this stage. So you're not putting a big strategic goal in there, but really thinking about, is it about share of voice? Is it about being a luxury brand? Where are we going to position ourselves? So later on, we've got strategy bingo, where we've put in some just starting point words for you to look at. And if you look at those words and start thinking, which of those really call to you when you're thinking about the communication strategy. But here we've got things like increase. So we're measuring just now, and we're trying to increase so that it's greater in the future. Maybe achieve. So is there a specific thing that we're trying to achieve, and what would that be? We've got leading and share of voice here. We've got, becoming a luxury brand. So being that go-to brand, and obviously measurement is important as well. And there's a whole topic on that later on, just near the end of our series. So from there, this point, we're going to try and create this strategy and think about what that strategy is. And personally, it doesn't apply to everything. And, this is a framework, and there's not one size fits all. There isn't a perfect formula for any of the communications work that we're going to talk to you about over these 10 weeks. So if things that we talk about don't fit for you, they don't work, you've got a better way of doing it, then, you don't need to do everything we say. But also, it would be great if you could share that with the group and maybe give us some other direction of things that you might be doing that might be a bit different, because there's limited scope of what we can pack into each of these sessions. So we'd love to hear feedback. But my personal preference is to have an overarching strategy, and then sitting underneath that, maybe 2 to 3 pillars. So those are the things that make the strategy happen and that really kind of hold the strategy up. Created an example here around a tea brand. So the overarching strategy we've got there is secure our position as the world's best luxury tea brand. So that's the big picture. And it is bold. It's saying we want to secure our position and be the world's best luxury tea brand. So later on, you're going to think about how to measure that. But in the short term, the 3 strategic pillars are going to give you streams of activity that you're going to carry out with tactical execution in order to meet the strategy. So the first one, educate. So we're going to educate the luxury market on what makes a great tea. Now, at this strategic point, we're not going into the details. So what you don't put in the pillar is, we're going to make an educational series for Instagram using top chefs, for example. That will come later. At this point, we're just keeping it high level, so we're going to educate the market. Secondly, we're going to collaborate with luxury brands. So we want to reach their audience profile, we want to mirror them. So we're kind of going by association here, saying, if we are the world's best luxury tea brand, then we're going to be stocked in Harrods, and we're going to collaborate with them for our next launch, for example. That would be the tactic. The strategy is just high level. We're going to collaborate. And then thirdly, we are going to secure third-party endorsement from luxury influencers and foodies. So the strategy is that, and then when we get to the tactics later on, that could be that we're going to run an influencer campaign with the world's leading Michelin star chefs, so that they're integrating our tea into their food, for example. So hopefully you can see there the idea of having the overarching strategy and then having up to 3 pillars underneath, keeping them quite high level, but we've given some examples there as well of how the tactics would support the bigger strategy. We've got some questions now. So thinking about strategy development, this is a starting point and it is in the worksheets. What preconceptions or misconceptions do we need to address? And this will also fit alongside what we said earlier around finding some pain points too. So maybe, is the brand modernizing? Does it have some sort of history that it's taken forwards, that people really think about it as providing X, but that's completely shifted its strategy and now it does Y? A couple of good examples of that would be Xerox. So people have always thought of Xerox as doing photocopiers. Going into this new world, people aren't really using photocopiers anymore. So Xerox is now all about document management, and they're going through a big journey, and they've got some major preconceptions and misconceptions in the market of people that just think of Xerox as being photocopiers. But Xerox are now trying to sell, value-added services to help people to manage their documents. So that's quite a big shift for them. Another example, a really interesting brand that I loved working on was Butlins, which was a previous client of mine. And they had huge misconceptions and preconceptions, really as being kind of bottom of the market travel brand, and not providing a kind of luxury experience. So that was something ongoing that kind of was a thread in everything we did, was trying to talk to media and influencers about the way that Butlins has changed. The fact it now has a spa, it has a luxury hotel. I ran a campaign for them where we launched sushi, and we also ran champagne menus in their restaurants. So it's about addressing the past and dealing with that and then moving forwards. So that probably fills in well as well to thinking about what's held us back to date. So there's no point doing this work and coming up with a strategy that's the same as what you tried last year that, just isn't working and it's not getting you where you need to get to. So if you do have a really clear hurdle that you need to get over, often working that into your strategy can be a good way to address it head on and say, yes, this is a problem, this is holding us back. We want to be a global company, but we're headquartered in Cardiff and everyone thinks that we're Welsh, and we want to be global. So how can we build a global business without being seen as being a small player in a region of the UK? And then what does success look like? So there's lots of ways you can think about this. My personal favorite is, we love winning awards for our work. So quite often when we get really like a nice juicy brief in, we will think, why don't we try and create the award entry, in advance and think backwards from there. So if you start thinking about what would an award-winning campaign look like and how can you break that down into all the pieces of an award-winning campaign, that's going to help you to really focus and think about the strategy and think about what a successful campaign would look like. And then you're going to work backwards from there and think, how am I going to get there? And what are the steps that I need to take to achieve that? And then you've got 2 questions there around who can help you, who are the ultimate influencers. And I think influencers, again, is maybe a slightly overused word at the moment. I think instantly when someone says influencer, most people think of someone on Love Island who's going to do an Instagram message for you, and you know, that post's going to cost £20,000 or £100,000. But you know, influencer communication really is the core of what PR has always been. You know, going back to before the internet, public relations was about using people to you know, evangelize a brand, to advocate for something, or to be an ambassador. So influencers shouldn't be confused. And yes, social media influencers and micro influencers and people with lots of following are really important. But then you do have other people who might influence a buying decision or influence somebody to make a change. So it's worth really thinking about that and how partnering can really help your strategy. And then another bit of kind of critical thinking, particularly I think for anybody who's following our program, because they're maybe the only comms person in the organization, and that can be quite a lonely place. So if you were to ask somebody, if somebody else asked you for advice from the position that you're at the moment with your brand, think about how you would advise and consult to them. So try and take yourself out of the picture, trying to forget about what you know and what the barriers might be, and just try and provide a fresh opinion and a fresh pair of eyes, really. So this is the bingo that I mentioned. You can put your own words in here as well, and I think depending what sector you're in and what kind of organization you're communicating for, there are different focus areas. So if it's a product-led business, then you know, sales might be important, and that's about increasing. It's about delivering. If you are in the third sector, maybe it is about behavior change or nudging behaviors or making some kind of change to the way that people interact. Although equally, you know, we know the commercials of a third sector organization. So maybe it is about increasing donations and finding a way to support profitability. So that is strategic bingo. If you go back to your worksheets and think about your strategic plan, and if you get stuck, then come back to the bingo and have a look at those words, and you could almost complete the sentences, and then you'll get a feel for which ones might sit with you. And there's 4 boxes there as well, so you can come up with your own strategic words, and we'd love to see those as well shared, maybe in our Facebook group. So we've talked quite broadly there about strategies, but one quite specific area of strategy that we're seeing a lot more of now, not that it's a new thing, I think, you know, great brands have been doing this for many, many, many years, but purpose-led communications is a really interesting topic, and hopefully a lot of you will be inspired to think about purpose-led communications if you're not already. So we're going to speak to Fiona Milliken now and hear about her take on this. So I'm really excited to have Fiona Milliken with us today, all the way from Sydney. Fiona, it'd be great to hear about you.
Hi, Natalie, great to be chatting to you again. Yep, as Natalie says, I'm Fiona. I'm the General Manager of Living, and we are a creative communications agency here in Sydney.
Fantastic. Thanks, Fiona. So I know that one of your specialisms and things that you're really passionate about is purpose-led communication. Could you tell us what a purpose-led communication strategy is?
Because in its most simplest form, it's using the power of a brand to create a better world. What we found is that consumers aren't actually making decisions just based on products or services or even price anymore. They're actually really interested about what a brand is saying, and most importantly, what a brand is actually doing to back that up. They want brands to have similar beliefs and values to them. And again, they really want to see how brands can make a difference. I guess we all know at the moment the world's got some pretty big problems. So there's actually a big opportunity for brands to be an engine for good and make change and actually make a difference in people's lives.
Amazing. So what kind of brands do you think purpose-led communications works for?
I think every brand should have a purpose. It's the why. It's not all brands should have a social purpose, but every brand has the opportunity to have one. I mean, it's not a specific sector or vertical. It's more the decision the brand makes themselves. So I think the things that are interesting and important to look at if you're a brand thinking, should I have a social purpose, is one, heritage. How did the company start? Where it's from? This should be something that's fully ingrained into your social purpose strategy. And most importantly, what's your beliefs and values? Everything that's created for social purpose, if it's going to seem authentic for consumers, should be at the heart of the business. It should come from the bigger brand strategy, and it should be seen in every single thing that you do. But have fun with it. Think how you can use it creatively, and it can be a really, really strong business tool.
Yeah, exciting. So how do you mentioned there it needs to be authentic. If you're looking at the communication side of things, how can you make sure that it does run through the organization? Because otherwise, obviously, it could just be a sticking plaster and you've got a bad reputation underneath.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing, a purpose-driven communication should never be in response to something bad that's happened in your company. Your purpose-led communication should actually be at the forefront of everything you do. Your employers, when they start on the first day, should know what your purpose is. And the brands that you work with should know what your purpose is. Your consumers should clearly know what your purpose is. So this is not something that's short-term. It's got to be a long-term purpose-driven. So stop thinking in days and start thinking in years. And then it becomes naturally more authentic and genuine if, again, you think about the heritage, the beliefs, and the values that I spoke around, and that's how you go about creating a purpose strategy. It should seem real. And again, that's when you start to have fun. Bring it to life in interesting ways. Check with people in the business who they think is interesting, and build it across all channels and also internally as well. So again, if your consumers and your own employees know what's happening and they're engaged in the purpose and how you're bringing it to life, that's when you can ensure that it's completely authentic, it's real, and everyone's proud to be part of that organisation, make a change, and actually create a better world.
Amazing. So you've delivered this for lots of big brands. Could you give us some examples of ways that you've made this work and how you've brought this to life?
Yeah, absolutely. We have been lucky to work with some brands that really have this vision of creating a better future and a better world at the heart of everything we do. One of these brands is ANZ, and it's one of the biggest banks over here in Australia. And they have diversity and equality as their social purpose. And it's across everything that they do. So when I first started at 11, over 8 years ago, we worked on a campaign called GATMs. And it's where we turned all of their ATMs into GATMs, bedazzling them, giving them some beauty, and turning them into something fabulous for Mardi Gras. But while it was beautiful and while it went on to win Cannes Awards, it wasn't just for the beauty of turning these ATMs into ATMs. It's because behind it, it was genuinely authentic and genuine. One, the brand had been sponsoring Mardi Gras for over 10 years before they even implemented this big creative idea. But most importantly, all of their employees understood that they had proper diversity and inclusion in everything they do within the business. So it genuinely was true. And also they made an act and an impact and made something change. So for all the money that was raised from the campaign, they gave money to a charity so they could actually make a change, make the world a better place for the same-sex community. And actually at that point, before the law had changed, drive change so that same-sex couples could get married.
Amazing. And do you have any other examples?
Yeah, so another brand we work for is Wild Turkey, and their long-term strategy is called Spirit of the Wild. And what that's about is encouraging consumers to, one, enjoy the wilderness, but also two, to protect it. So again, it's a long-term strategy. It's something that's been in place for the last 5 years, and it's something that will continue to be in place, likely for the same again. So something we did last year was we partnered with their creative director, Matthew McConaughey, and a local startup here called Unyoked to create a fully sustainable cabin. That cabin was placed out into the wilderness, and all the money and all the profits raised from that cabin went back to a wilderness charity that's going to regenerate and rebuild the wilderness, so that not only can we enjoy the wilderness now, but it means that future generations can enjoy the wilderness while, of course, enjoying a glass of wild turkey.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Fee. Is there anything else to share just to close up on purpose-led communication?
Yeah, I think it's about being authentic, as you mentioned, Natalie. That's really, really important. And making sure that it's at the heart of your brand and the heart of your whole entire strategy, and then getting creative with it and making sure all your audiences know exactly what you're doing.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Fiona. I know it's late over there in Sydney, so I'm glad we can make this work, and really good insights for us as we're talking about strategy today. So lots that we can take away from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Good to see you.
Bye. And further to what Fiona was saying, we've got a couple of case studies now just to show you some of the work that Fiona was talking about. So first of all, this is the Gay TM project that 11PR delivered for the bank.
ATMs, I love them.
Oh, KTM! KTM! We love KTM.
Fabulous. See you next year, honey.
And secondly, here is a case study video from 11PR of their Wild Turkey campaign.
So I'm back in Australia today as part of Wild Turkey's With Thanks initiative. It's an initiative that gives back to the community. Myself, Cam, and Chris, we've designed this eco cabin. We call it the Reserve. We've crafted a place for folks to get off the grid and reconnect with the wild. These guys quit their jobs to build a series of cabins made from sustainable materials to encourage more of us to enjoy the natural beauty of the bush.
You know what this is from? Trinidad. It's a rusting coal.
That's the kind of unwavering conviction we're talking about. This is the living area. We've got books, music, kitchen, bespoke handcrafted bar with some long branch if you so choose. And of course, there is the long branch loo. Now that's a mission worth toasting. With thanks.
So that's just about it for this week. I've really enjoyed it again, and particularly enjoyed my chat with Fiona and hearing about the incredible work that they're doing in Sydney. Just to check in, really, we're into week 2 of the sort of 10 stages. We did send around a survey last week because we're really keen that you get everything you want to from these sessions. So if you have time, please do fill in the survey and tell us what you think. Tell us how we could improve these sessions. Tell us, any questions you might like to raise for any of the topics that we have coming up, and also suggest any speakers that you're really keen to hear from. If you don't have the link in the email, you can also contact us, events@mucklemedia.co.uk. We'll be able to get the survey out to you. Or feel free to ping us some feedback as well. If you don't want to do the survey, send us a few sentences and tell us what we're doing well and what we could do better. And we've been putting out a weekly email. So we're sending an email out on the Wednesday with the link for Thursday. And we're also sending out a link back to the recording on a Friday for everybody, just in case you miss it, or you might want to share it with colleagues as well. So just to double check everyone's getting that. If you're not, it might be worth checking your spam folder, checking your quarantine, and also just making sure that you've whitelisted Muckle Media. If you don't have those emails, then if you want to be getting them, drop us an email at events@mucklemedia, and we'll make sure that you're added onto the mailing list. And if you're consistently not receiving them for any reason, do let us know, because we're sending them on HubSpot. We can manually send them to anybody that might have an issue with HubSpot emails. And the slides for every week, we're going to start putting those onto SlideShare. So don't worry about taking notes. We obviously record these and play them back. So everything's always available on our Facebook page, but we'll put the slides specifically onto SlideShare as well. So if you are looking to kind of go back to anything we've covered, they'll be on there. Just a reminder, on our website, we have the diagnostic, and again, we've sent a link to it, but if you need it again, let us know. We've also created the worksheets, and they have the diagnostic in them. And then they also have, for each week's theme, they've got some sort of starting points to try and stimulate you thinking about the topic. So it's not going to give you everything you need to get there. You might want to just do some other thinking specific to your sector and the starting point that you're coming from, but it's really just to get you thinking and get you started. And then also we have the Facebook group. So if you search Facebook for CommsCamp discussion group, you'll be able to find that. Again, we've emailed a link to it, and if you don't have access to it, let us know, because it'd be great to see you there. We've got weekly threads for the topic of the week. So if you are bamboozled at the end of this this session and you feel like you would like some inspiration from the group, then try posting some of your challenges onto the Facebook group. I'd appreciate everyone keeping everything on there confidential. So please do feel like you can share and explain the kind of challenges you might be facing in your organisation. And hopefully then the group can help you with some peer support to try and whether it's brainstorming ideas or trying to help you to crack the strategy. And then thinking about next week, we're going to be talking about reputation. So we will be keeping you posted, but obviously it will be on Facebook Live as usual at 9:30 next Thursday. If anyone does have questions specific to reputation, again, please email them over to us and we'll make sure that we build those into to the session. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you next week.